Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. You can find our podcast as well as tons of other great podcasts and content on fullpresscoverage.com. And you can find us anywhere podcasts are found, or if you like the visual presentation, find us on YouTube, youtube.com/JetStryer. Remember, if you go to the YouTube page, to like with a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment and we will comment back. Sap, we've been talking more this season about the Brooklyn Nets probably than they've been talked about in the past 50 years. This has been the season of the Brooklyn Nets because coming into it, we knew Kevin Durant was returning. And then right at the beginning of the season, they had James Harden, who was basically forced his way to that team. And for the bulk of the regular season, they have looked phenomenal, despite not having their big three for just a handful of games. Now we're looking at potential playoff matchups for them because the playoffs are coming sooner than you know it. And so it's getting real for Brooklyn. You have to look at it as, okay, they're finally going to have their big three for the playoffs, we expect. Who presents the most difficult path for them to get to the finals? I said on the show last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point, Sap, I have them as my champions. I've seen enough. I think they're going to win it all. But just because I'm predicting that doesn't mean it's true. And just because I'm predicting that doesn't mean that one team might put a scare in them. So, Sap, the three teams we talk about in the East, Brooklyn, Philly, Milwaukee, which team puts the fear of God into Brooklyn more between those two teams?
On the surface, and I've been saying this all year, I was thinking it was Philadelphia because you have Joel Embiid, who I think is going to finish second in MVP voting behind Nikola Jokic. So you can make a case that Embiid would be so dominant in a series against Brooklyn that he could carry them. Now, he would need some help from Ben Simmons, who we really can't always trust because Simmons doesn't have a perimeter game. He does everything else at a very high level, but oftentimes you're playing 4 and 5 against the opposition when he's on the court. Philadelphia has improved their coaching with Doc Rivers. They have some really good outside shooters now in Danny Green, Seth Curry. Green brings that championship DNA. He's won back-to-back championships 2 years ago with Toronto, last year with the Lakers. Maybe he's his generation's Robert Horry. Wherever he goes, they start winning championships.
He won with the Spurs too, right?
So he won with the Spurs as well.
3 rings from 3 teams.
A lot of rings. He's like LeBron, 3 rings. 4 rings with 3 teams in LeBron's case, except LeBron has MVPs in the finals. But Danny Green's carved out a really nice career as a really good role player.
Robert Horry,
made a lot
I think
of money.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah, we'll hit a big shot. We'll play good defense. Just knows where to go and knows what his role is. But looking deeper into this, I may start to lean in your direction because you've been very high in the Milwaukee Bucks, especially the last month or two. And I kept being hesitant because I just have this in my mind that the last 2 years, Milwaukee had great regular seasons and then disappointed in the postseason because Giannis couldn't just step it up. They put the wall around him. He got frustrated and there weren't other players to help him break through. Well, we saw a couple days ago, Milwaukee and Brooklyn in one of the most entertaining games of the year. And Giannis was unstoppable, had 49. Kevin Durant for Brooklyn was unstoppable with 42. But some of the other players really stepped up for Brooklyn, for Milwaukee. I thought Drew Holiday did a nice job. I also think that Chris Middleton did a nice job. Those are the second and third best players on Milwaukee. They're going to have to step it up. I think that it is a tough matchup for Brooklyn dealing with Giannis. Who exactly can cover him? They put DeAndre Jordan on him for quite a bit. It was a joke. Durant's really not an elite defender to deal with Giannis. Meanwhile, on the other end of the court, look, Durant's unstoppable, but they can rotate different bodies at him, and then in crunch time, they can put Giannis on Durant, and Giannis is the reigning defensive player of the year. So that matchup looks a lot tougher than I anticipated after watching a game last Sunday with Milwaukee eking out a victory over Brooklyn. And the other thing, too, wild conspiracy theory, backed up a little bit with numbers, Kyrie Irving doesn't play well in Milwaukee. We remember in the playoffs 2 years ago, again, I think he had checked out with the Celtics.
When he quit, yes.
When he quit. Sunday's game, it looked like he wasn't really engaged either. And I think Drew Holiday might be a tough matchup for him because Holiday's an elite defender. He's physical.
He's a pest. Yeah,
he's a pest. But he's also a skilled pest, right? I mean, like Patrick Beverley's a pest.
He's a better version of Marcus Smart.
Better version of Marcus Smart because he's a really good offensive player. So I think Kyrie looked really frustrated, and we know he didn't play well in Milwaukee in the postseason 2 years ago. Remember, I believe it was his first year in Boston. The Celtics were playing an early season game in Milwaukee, and he didn't want to play because of the floor. Remember they put the old Mecca floor onto the new arena, and he
all
didn't want
these
to play.
Things were really red flags that I should have been aware of when he was in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, well, the Milwaukee Bucks in the '80s had this floor that looked really odd back then, but now it's probably considered cool because it's retro. So they put that floor out there for the first game in that arena, which the Celtics were playing in, and Kyrie didn't want to play. So I don't know if
I'm
maybe
remembering
there's something
that now,
about Milwaukee. He doesn't like Milwaukee. Look, I think every player kind of goes to a place and they're kind of weirded out by the arena, the city, whatever the case may be. Larry Bird never played great in Golden State. He actually had a game there where he scored 0 points, if you can believe that, back in 1980-81 season when the Celtics actually won the championship. So there's always like one place that the player goes to and is like, I don't really like being here. Maybe Milwaukee's that place for Kyrie Irving. I don't know. He did not look engaged in that game on Sunday. So I'm starting to lean in your direction that Milwaukee might be a little tougher out than Philadelphia. And also, Milwaukee's 3-0 against Philadelphia this year. They're 1-1 against Brooklyn, and they're having the final matchup against Brooklyn tonight. And the winner of that will earn the tiebreaker, potential, playoff series or seeding in the Eastern Conference. So I'm starting to lean in the direction of Milwaukee because the last 2 years anticipation and expectations was so high and they disappointed that now they're going to fly out on the radar, and they're still a really good team playing excellent defense. And maybe it's time Giannis just, he figures it out. Let's not forget Giannis is 26. It's not like he's 30. He's still getting better. I think that they could cause more of a problem because of that elite defensive ability and who the hell is covering Giannis down the stretch for Brooklyn. By the way, who the hell's covering Joel Embiid for Brooklyn? Brooklyn has a massive hole in the middle. Any player with size or ability to get to the rim is going to be an issue for them.
Yeah, I mean, if Brooklyn ends up playing Milwaukee or they end up playing Philadelphia, one of those two star players, Embiid or Giannis, is going to average like 35 plus points a game in that series. That's a given. And yeah, I've liked Milwaukee this year for a few reasons. Like you said, they're under the radar, so they don't have nearly as much pressure. All the pressure is on Brooklyn to come out of the East. I mean, all the pressure. And I'd say second most pressure is on Philadelphia because I think there's a lot of pressure on that tandem of Embiid and Simmons. Is it a viable championship tandem? So it's a nice position for Milwaukee to be in. And it's also, I think, by far, to me, the best roster they've had since Giannis has come into his own as an MVP level player. You talk about the defense, Sap. I look at Giannis, Lopez, Holiday, and Tucker all as really, really plus defensive players. I think DiVincenzo is a pretty good defensive player. I think Middleton is solid defensively. They don't have a guy other than if they're going to play Jeff Teague, who's like a complete sieve defensively. And so I just like the ability to bring in a lot of guys. Like you said, it's not just throwing bodies, but it's throwing really skilled bodies. Like, Giannis won Defensive Player of the Year last year. He's one of the best defensive players in basketball. You could say that about Drew Holiday. He'll make all defensive team. He's made it a couple times already. He's one of the best defensive backcourt guys in basketball. I think PJ Tucker is one of the best defensive basketball players too. He doesn't look like he's super athletic, but he's so strong and he's a very smart player. And you can see he's not putting up major stats for them, but he's playing a lot of minutes and they're playing well when he's on the court because he's a player who sort of knows his role.
Isn't he just a winner, PJ Tucker? It seems like wherever he goes, and he did a good job with Houston.
I think he's a good
when
locker
they got to the
room
conference
guy,
finals. I think he is because he's a guy who didn't come into the league with much of a reputation coming out of Texas. He doesn't even really fit looking like a basketball player. He's like 6'5", 250. He's got his socks up to his knees. He's a physical guy, but he can hit that corner jumper. Yeah, he's a guy you want on your roster. In some sense, kind of like Jay Crowder. Like it seems where Jay Crowder goes, the team plays better. He went to Miami. They played better. He goes to Utah. They played better. I mean, when he was here, They made it to the conference finals a couple times. So just look at it that certain guys are perfect fits for that. That's something I think the Celtics are lacking right now. That guy who just understands his role and isn't trying to compete with Tatum or Brown, understands what he's supposed to do. And PJ Tucker is one of those guys. Connaughton's a really good athlete.
He's from the area too.
Great athlete. I mean, he's got like a 42-inch vertical jump. And, I think that Drew Holiday, he's a player that's grown on me. At first I was like, boy, they gave up a lot to get him. But now that you see him play, the way he plays defense, the way he, I think he commands that team. I think they look to him for leadership as well, that he was well worth that price because you know what you're getting every night with Drew Holiday. And now Chris Middleton can maybe step back a little bit and be 2B.
Sap, that's a great point. I think it takes more
2B
pressure off Middleton than it takes off of Giannis.
Yeah, Giannis is going to do what he does. I mean, look, the guy has got freakish ability, but now he's got two guys that he can trust that can step up and maybe get 25 points. I think for Milwaukee to get through the East, one of those other guys, not Middleton, not Drew Holiday, obviously not Giannis, but someone else is going to have to step up. Was it Brook Lopez or Tucker or DiVincenzo or Connaughton? Yeah. Someone is going to have to step up and have a couple of big games in a potential series. Because that can be the difference.
In this era, it means hit threes, basically.
That's what
it means. They have another guy, Bryn Forbes. He's like the best corner three shooter in the NBA, I think, statistically. So they need guys, the guys to step up and hit threes in the playoffs. That's what it comes down to.
That's what it comes down to. That's what it is. Yeah, it's like you bullpen in baseball. You need a bullpen to excel. You win games. Yeah, Forbes, I'm like, who is this guy? I thought he was a magazine. And, he's hitting corner threes at, I think, 56%. He was huge in that win a couple days ago over Brooklyn. So I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for Brooklyn because I know that the talent is extreme. They've
first round will be.
Oh, the first round is going to be pretty much easy for all of these three teams. The Knicks against whoever's the 5 seed, that's going to be a battle because the Knicks are so well coached. But yeah, these three teams should advance in a sweep or at the worst 5 games, so they'll be ready. But you want to be the 1 seed because then if you are, you avoid playing a tough team in the second round. And Philly's right there with Brooklyn and Milwaukee. Tonight, if they can beat Brooklyn, they're only 1 game behind them in the loss column, and they would win the season series. So it's going to be interesting to watch down the stretch. Like I said, Durant, Harden, Kyrie have only played 7 games, 183 minutes together. Look, those are guys I think that they could go away from each other for 2 months, come back, and it's going to fit because they can all create their own offense, and they also can all catch and shoot, which is pretty simple to do. I mean, Kevin Durant in his sleep can put up 30. It's not like they have to wade through a complex offense. It's like, let's get KD open. He's going to hit the jumper, or he can create his own jumper from wherever. So I think it's going to be interesting in the Eastern Conference, but there's only 3 teams with a chance to get to the championship. I don't think you're going to see a 5 seed like Miami break through. No. It's going to be one of those 3 teams.
It's funny with Brooklyn, if they had figured out a way, and I think they almost could have, to have kept Jarrett Allen in that Harden trade, then they'd have no holes because he would be perfect for to defend a guy like Embiid or Giannis. I mean, I'm not saying he shut him down, but he could at least present more of a challenge. And I think you said DeAndre Jordan's he's shot at this point. He can't do anything defensively. So and they left him one-on-one with Giannis. It was, the teams are going to score in Brooklyn. It's just that Brooklyn's going to probably outscore them.
Well, that game featured the top 2 scoring teams in the league. Now, so Milwaukee can put points on the board, but they also have the ability to maybe win a physical type game, low scoring game because of their defense. So they maybe have a couple more options than Brooklyn, but Brooklyn's still scary because you get 3 elite players that at any given night can go get 50, and it wouldn't surprise you even in the postseason.
Yeah, so I do think it's going to be Milwaukee that presents the tougher challenge. Whether we'll even get to see that matchup is anybody's guess. It's all going to depend on seeding. I still think Brooklyn would beat them, but I do think that Milwaukee could actually give them a pretty tough series. Maybe we're discounting Philadelphia too much. I just look at, like you said, I like the depth of Milwaukee's defense better than the depth of Phillies, and I've seen Embiid get fatigued more than I've seen Giannis get fatigued. Giannis doesn't get fatigued; he gets frustrated.
He gets frustrated. I mean, Giannis is in some sense a little bit like Russell Westbrook. I don't think he's necessarily the most skilled guy, but he's a phenomenal athlete. He's in tremendous shape, and he's a max effort guy. So he may have a bad game, but it's not because of fatigue or conditioning. Embiid looks like a guy who, if the schedule gets to him, may have an off night because he's just not in the best of shape. He's in better shape now than he's ever been. But then the wild card in this whole thing is Ben Simmons. And you're not asking Ben Simmons to go out and score 22, but can he drive to the basket, get to the foul line, and hit 70, 75% of his free throws? If he can do that, now he's a weapon. We know what he does on the boards, how he can set up his teammates, how much great defense he plays. They could be tough. It's going to be interesting in the Eastern Conference. I mean, I think we all believe Brooklyn is the team to beat because of that ridiculous talent that they have, the top three. But those other teams will provide some issues going forward. And I think they're both well-coached teams, Philadelphia and Milwaukee. I don't know about that with Milwaukee. With Brooklyn, we haven't really seen that yet. And that coaching staff doesn't exactly exude a defensive DNA. Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni. I mean, they're not exactly, to think of like a wild offensive coordinator in the NFL. Oftentimes their defense isn't going to be very good because they don't even pay attention to it. Or flip it, someone like Rex Ryan, who was a great defensive coordinator, had no idea what he was doing on offense. With the Brooklyn Nets, offense is not going to be a problem. With those three guys in that coaching
they're built to
staff.
outscore teams. That's what they are. They're built to outscore teams.
And again, you can have an off night, although Kevin Durant doesn't generally have off nights. Just watching him play is truly amazing. It really is. Because
who's their best defensive player, Sep, on Brooklyn? Honestly, who's their best defensive player?
Brown? He's like a 6'4" guy that they'll play a lot in the low post. I mean, Durant can be a decent defender because he's 7 feet. He's long and he's got good instincts. He's also can be
Jeff
overpowered. Green. There's Jeff Green is one of the most maddening players I think I've ever seen. There's parts of a game that he looks like James Worthy. You remember when he first came to the Celtics, how he would play against the Heat? He had 37 in a game against
game
LeBron.
Winner.
He used to play out of his mind against Miami, and then the next night against whoever, he would absolutely suck. There's times that even in that game on Sunday, there was here comes this guy with a massive a dunk attempt. I was like, that looks like James Worthy. It's Jeff Green. Of course, he missed it. He back rimmed the dunk, and then there's other plays where he's just other times in the game where he's completely off. He's a decent defender, good athlete. Maybe it is Durant. It's certainly not Harden or Kyrie, although Kyrie had some moments in that game on Sunday where it looked like he was engaged. If they're decent defensively, they're going to be nearly impossible to beat because offensively they're elite. They're the best offense in basketball without question.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's how they constructed the team was basically let's just try to get as much offensive firepower as possible. And I think it's going to work. I hope it doesn't, but it looks like it's heading in that direction. And we'll see, though. I'm a lot more excited for the Eastern Conference Finals than the Western Conference Finals because I think that and one of the Eastern Conference semifinals. I don't know what it's going to be, but between those three teams, the first two matchups, the first matchup of those three teams, and then the second one in the finals, I think will be really fun. And in the West, I just it looks like it's the Lakers Invitational to me or the Clippers. I would like the Lakers Clippers finals matchup a lot, conference finals matchup a lot, but every other series I would if it's Nets, if it's Brooklyn, no, not Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Philly, I think that would be awesome.
Yep.
And I think Milwaukee, Brooklyn, or Philly, Brooklyn would also be awesome. I only see one great series in the Western Conference, Clippers, Lakers, if that makes sense. Yeah,
even though the West is deep, and I think you see that when you see the West's 7-seeded team, Portland, beating the Eastern Conference's 7-seeded team, the Celtics, the other night. So the West is just deeper, without question. I mean, Golden State's the 10 seed right now, and obviously they're not a well-constructed team right now without Klay Thompson playing the last 2 years, but they do have Steph Curry, who would scare the hell out of you in a one-game play-in tournament. So the East is very top-heavy, and I don't see anybody crashing that party. Too bad you couldn't just have this round robin with those three teams. Have first team to 7 wins playing each other all the time. it would be kind of a fun episode to have. But the East should be interesting this year. I don't see a Miami Heat type team surprising us as a 5 seed. I can't see that happening.
No, I don't either. So we're looking into the future. Let's go look into the past, Sap. You found an article in Forbes. I didn't know you were such an informed reader of businesses and stuff like that. But this was basically, they did a deep statistical dive to rank their top 25 NBA players since 1973-74. Purely statistical dive, like all numbers, right? So can you explain this a little bit, how they went about it? Just explain
I'd
it
rather
like I'm
not, because
explain it like I'm 5.
Headache. No, it's just all different numbers. And I think 73-74 was the start of this, because that's the first year that blocks and steals were official in the NBA. So, to weigh those statistical components, they waited till 73-74. Sometimes I like to say since the merger, which was 76-77, there's just a lot of numbers jumbled in. I mean, if you like baseball reference or basketball reference, this goes even deeper. I can't even explain it, because I think the average person that reads Forbes probably has an IQ of about 140. I fall a little bit short on that, but I got to manage
you were
my
reading
portfolio.
You were reading Forbes?
Well, no, I stumbled on it and
Don't
just
admit
was
that.
intrigued. I love lists. You know how I am with lists. I mean, I'm like the king of lists. And, every time there's a list, I'm like, is someone going to have the balls to say that LeBron's better than Jordan? And other than me, Nick Wright, and Shannon Sharp, there just hasn't been enough of that. But there will be at some point when he retires.
What a trio.
Oh, my two guys. Also, Shannon's a huge Aaron Rodgers fan. That's why we connect. But just looking at this list, what did you find to be the weirdest selection? Not just the number, but the
Manu Ginobili.
Yeah, I mean, I like Manu Ginobili at 25. So according to this,
that name stuck out like a sore thumb. I like Manu Ginobili, but he was ranked 25
player
of the all-time.
Fantastic player. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He always came off the bench. He was a great role player on a great team. But according to this, the San Antonio Spurs should have never lost any year, because they had Tim Duncan at number 4, David Robinson at number 8, Manu, of course, was at number 25, and Kawhi Leonard was on here at number 19. So they had 4 of the top 25 players. The Spurs should have had more than 5 championships, because they apparently had, 4 all-time greats. I do think that David Robinson was a little too high at number 8.
Yeah.
And I love David Robinson, but he was ahead of
Hakeem better than Robinson.
I like Hakeem better. I like Charles Barkley better. I like Kobe Bryant and Larry Bird certainly better than David Robinson. I even like Steph Curry more than
Larry Bird.
David Robinson.
Way too low on this list, as did Kobe.
At number 10 was Bird. At number 14 was Kobe. In my all-time list, and this includes the history of the NBA, I have Bird at number 7 and Kobe at number 9. So we're eliminating, Russell, Chamberlain, West, Oscar, Elgin Baylor, any of those great players. So they should be higher up on this list. To no surprise, it was Jordan, LeBron. I think almost every list we see now, it's that, right?
Yeah, so
Jordan and
keep
LeBron,
in mind,
1,
again,
2.
Purely statistics. So, you take away championships or whatever. You're not looking at names. You're just looking at numbers. And what this also leads me to believe, Sap, is that if there were blocks and steals calculated, that Chamberlain and Russell would probably be 1 and 2 by like a million, because they recorded outrageous numbers of blocks.
Oh,
and
Chamberlain used to average a quadruple double for months. Because he would. They didn't have it as an official stat, and I think there were some games where they would try to, like, okay, let's just see how many blocks Russell and Chamberlain get, and they were like at 11 by halftime. So I was all right, that's enough for
Chamberlain, if you're looking at just stats, Chamberlain's the greatest player of all time, and it's not close. If you're just looking at stats, he's above everybody else by a country mile.
He's Babe Ruth. He's Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, it's not close. No one's approaching. Jerry Rice,
right. Those are the guys that you look and go, man, he's lapping people. I mean, like Wayne Gretzky has more assists than any other player has points. And I don't even think Wayne Gretzky's the greatest player ever. I think it's Mario Lemieux, but statistically, it's Gretzky. It's Ruth, it's Wilt, Yeah, I mean, it's just, you just look at it and go, this is absurd. Jerry Rice is the guy in football. As great as Tom Brady is, he hasn't lapped the field in terms of touchdown passes and yards. You know, he's
No,
right
go
there
look
with
at Jerry
Breeze and
Rice's
Manning.
receiving numbers. They're absurd.
They're in another league, right? I mean, he's played longer than anybody. He was better than anybody. So, Jordan, LeBron, I think that's the consensus. Although I
Do
go
you want me to read down
Jordan.
the list, Sep?
Why don't you read down the list and we'll kind of react to it, because there's 25 here. And again, there's a few I think are too low, and there are a few that think they're too high. So we'll kind of react to it.
And just so people could see, did you post this on your Twitter too, or we can link to it on one of our Twitters?
No, I didn't post it. We will.
So,
we will.
Yeah,
because
so we'll
I'll put
post
out
it so you
top
can see
25.
it too.
Yeah.
All right, so Sap will post it on his Twitter at JohnSap25, JOHNSAP, and then the numbers 2 and 5. So make sure you look for that just to see, for more context, what we're talking about now from this Forbes article. So I'll just read the top 25 real quick. Michael Jordan, this is in order from 1 to 25. Michael Jordan 1, LeBron James, Magic Johnson, Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, Kareem, Kevin Durant, David Robinson, Chris Paul, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon, Dirk Nowitzki, Kobe Bryant, Steph Curry, Karl Malone, James Harden, John Stockton, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Garnett, Dwayne Wade, Dr. J, Anthony Davis, Clyde Drexler, Manu Ginobili rounds out the top 25. Yeah, Sap, I mean, other names that stick out to me, and again, it's hard to do this because they're just looking at numbers. We're looking at names right now. Is Chris Paul is way too high. I mean, we both like Chris Paul, but outrageously high to be ahead of guys like Kobe, Bird, Barkley, Olajuwon, Garnett. He's nowhere. He's a great player, all-time great player. Nowhere near some of these guys. I mean, I just don't see it. But again, I don't have the same data set as they do.
Chris Paul's 9th. Isaiah Thomas isn't even on the list, and Chris Paul is the modern day version of Isaiah Thomas, except Isaiah Thomas was better. Isaiah Thomas, I think, is becoming one of the most overlooked, underrated players in the history of the sport.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of it has to do that Michael Jordan hates him. So like people love Michael Jordan. So if you're an enemy of Michael Jordan, then you're an enemy of everybody else. I mean, who got shit on more during the Last Dance more than, well, Scottie Pippen to some degree, but also Isaiah Thomas. So Isaiah Thomas is I think a top 30 player in the history of the sport, certainly would be top 25 since 1973-74. Moses Malone isn't on the list, a 3-time MVP, led the league in rebounding numerous times. I thought was the best player in basketball for about a 4 or 5 year period. Patrick Ewing, he'd be a borderline guy. Again, if he had been able to win that championship in 94, the narrative would be different on Patrick Ewing. Look, if you want to talk numbers, Russell Westbrook, I mean, obviously not a really good 3-point shooter, but the guy's averaging a triple-double for the 4th time in 5 years. And then Allen Iverson. I mean, a guy who played in an era that was a physical era, led the league in scoring a couple of times. I mean, if you want to count the fact that the guy averaged 42 minutes a game some years at 5'10", 160 pounds, I think he belonged in there.
Especially Kevin McHale, not on there. I mean, I know
that's a tough one. Yeah,
Dominique Wilkins.
You could make a case for Dominique Wilkins. Yeah, I mean, Anthony Davis is in there, but Anthony Davis is a darling of the statisticians of the. Yeah. I mean, he's like, his career PER is 3rd all time behind Jordan and LeBron. I don't think he's the 3rd best player ever. I don't even have him in my top 30 right now. Drexler, I think that's a good move in there, having him. He was probably the 2nd best 2-guard in the league for a few years after Jordan. There's no George Gervin here, who led the league in scoring 4 times. As far as Kareem's too low at 6. I mean, Kareem, again, he did play 4 years before 73-74, so we're not counting that. But, even from 73-74 on, he still was a 4-time MVP, what have you. I think he's too low. I think David Robinson's too high. Chris Paul's criminally too high, and I love Chris Paul. Not the 9th best player since 1973-74. It's not better than Bird, who's, I think, criminally low. Olajuwon is behind Barkley. I would take Olajuwon over Barkley. Kobe at 14, that's a joke. I mean, seriously, I think
that's way too
that's
low.
A joke.
Embarrassingly low.
Kawhi belong on this list? Now, I know he's had the great playoff moments. Kawhi just cracked, I think, 10,000 points in his career, just surpassed like 500 games. He doesn't have
service time.
Great numbers. Yeah, I mean, Kawhi is turning into Hillary Swank. Like Hilary Swank won 2 Oscars, Boys Don't Cry and $1 Million Baby, and like didn't do much else. Kawhi has the 2 titles and didn't do much else. So there I go. I compare Kawhi Leonard to an actress. And Manu being on the list, I think Skip Bayless must have came up with this.
Yeah,
list
I'm not sure how.
He's a huge Manu. Like that's an odd guy because he was more than numbers, right?
And I thought Parker was the better of the two of those guys.
Throw
anyways,
him on there too. Yeah, he was the Finals MVP, Tony Parker, right? I think he made the All-Star team more often than Manu. I mean, if it's all about numbers, Manu was more about other things besides numbers.
Yeah,
to have
I'm not
him
sure
on here.
What they were looking at with Manu, where the numbers indicated, maybe just they were so good when he was on the court.
Could be, yeah. The formula.
But is that a product of him or Tim Duncan?
Right. I mean, my feelings on Tim Duncan. I think he's also somewhat overlooked. I mean, I laugh when people put Shaq over Duncan career-wise. I think Duncan was a better player. That's a good discussion, but I
don't know how anybody does that. Really, I don't. I think Duncan had the better career by virtually every metric. Maybe he wasn't as dominant in an individual season, but over the course of his career, he was more dominant. He was also so durable, like shockingly durable for a big guy. Big guys are never that durable.
He was great. He was, the big fundamental. I think if you really love basketball, he's a guy you are attracted to because he did everything right. I mean, like the bank shot's not real sexy, but it's
he made
effective.
The playoffs every year of his career. They never won less than 50 games, ever.
He was to San Antonio what Tom Brady was to the Patriots, the best player who was allowed his coach to coach him. Right, so Belichick coached Brady hard, so it allowed Belichick to coach the rest of his team hard. Well, Popovich was able to coach Tim Duncan hard. Allowed Popovich to coach the rest of the team hard. Same guy, essentially. Now, Brady's final chapter or two is kind of elevated him past everyone in almost any sport as he wins a Super Bowl at 43 years old, his 7th. But Duncan and Brady, I think, are pretty comparable guys up until the last few years when Brady's surpassed him.
Yeah, I think a part of it is because Brady wanted to keep playing it. I don't think Tim Duncan did. If you look at Tim Duncan's last year, I still think he was averaging like a double-double or close to it. He had stuff left in the tank. I think he was just done.
Yeah, he was fine. He never really was big as far as the limelight. I don't even know who his wife is.
He's had a divorce or two. I don't.
Yeah, he shops at Target. He's kind of an assistant coach. He was never an interesting guy. I mean,
his wife works at the DMV.
Yeah, he's just.
She's the person who took the tickets at the arena.
He's a unique guy. I mean, and what a wonderful basketball player. I mean, did everything. A great defensive player, scored whenever needed to. Mid-range guy, back to basket. Excellent passer, leader, the whole bit. I mean, so I think on this list, I think he's right where he should be, although I would not put him ahead of Kareem. But again, I think Kareem's the weird one in here because
he played both before and after.
Started, 1969 was his first year. So he's got 4 or 5 years before this, but even from 73 on, he belongs on there.
He's the only person on this list who overlaps that time period before and after.
Yeah, and like I've said before, there's only 3 players in the history of the sport that you can make a case would make the all-decade team in 2 decades. Only 3 players. It would be Jordan, LeBron, and Kareem. They all had such impact for such a long period of time that they would make all-decade teams in 2 decades. That's pretty impressive.
I guess you could maybe say Duncan, right? 2000s and the 2010s, they won another title, but probably not. Probably not an all-decade team.
He started to slip a little bit there.
Yeah. I think you're right, Sepp. I do.
Yeah, Kareem, you could say 70s and 80s, although Moses Malone in the early 80s was probably a little better than Kareem, but, it's a good discussion. LeBron in the 2000s, 2010s, and Jordan
he might be the most
clear-cut
one, LeBron.
Yeah. I mean, you could make a case he was the player of the 2000s and the 2010s.
Right, because Jordan didn't get all the 80s under him. Certainly, he was the best player of the 90s. LeBron got, he came in, to 04, 05?
03, 04, yep.
So similar to that, and he's still in the 2020s now, the best player in the league. So he's pretty clearly. I mean, you can make a case. By the time his career is over, you could say 3 decades. I frankly don't know at this point, Sepp. I mean, really.
He's like Brady in that sense that they continue to amazing. Let's not forget, I know you're higher on the Lakers, believe it or not, than I am going into this postseason in a couple of weeks. But there was a time where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 7-5, and Tom Brady was forgetting how many, what down it was.
And doing the same thing LeBron was, making it look harder than it actually was.
Yeah. Building up sympathy, and we'll overlook him. That's not a big deal. And what Tampa had to win 3 games on the road to get to the Super Bowl. So
hard path.
The parallels there. Yeah, same thing could be for the Lakers as well.
Yeah, so it's an interesting list, and make sure you look at Sapp's Twitter again, John Sapp, JOHNSAP 25. Because he'll tweet out the list and he'll tweet out the methodology too. Because again, it's just me reading off their methodology would be like you listening to paint dry. So check it out for yourself. It's basically they're just looking at numbers. Take away titles, take away wins, take away the name. Just look at the raw data. Obviously, we know as NBA fans that you can't just do that. That's why the NBA is exciting. Otherwise, it would just be a computer game. And you just put in numbers, and you would see that it's beyond numbers. But it is interesting. So Sapp's going to tweet that out, and we'll obviously both tweet out the podcast, so you can check that out there. We'll be back on Wednesday with a fresh edition of the pod. As the playoffs approach, you're going to be wanting to listen to every single one of these episodes as we get you ready for that. For the exciting NBA postseason that I already know what's going to happen in, Lakers and Nets in the finals, Nets win. But, we've got to watch anyways. You never know. Injuries could happen. I thought that the Warriors were never going to lose, and they got injured and lost to the Raptors.
Yeah.
So we are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sapp, presented as always by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check us out wherever podcasts are found. We make it easy for you. We're everywhere that podcasts are. Right on your phone on the podcast app. Just search the whole name, the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sapp. You can go to Full Press Coverage to find it. You can go to Spotify and find us, or you could just go directly to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JetStryer, and find it there. Again, we will tweet out the links to the YouTube and the audio version. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday. See you, everybody.